Welcome back, man. Another speed running podcasting booty call.
that's the hope.
Do more hard things every day is a great mantra, but it should be less about ice baths and more about making that decision you've been putting off for 3 months.
Yeah. I think that there's been a big misconception around hard stuff, which is just that like running a marathon necessarily means that you can have a hard conversation with your wife by saying like, oh, I do hard things. But those hard things don't necessarily generalize. And so I think domain specificity is much more narrow, unless you decide to generalize to an identity label of like, I am the type of person who can do hard things because I ran this marathon or because I do these ice baths. And then as a result, I can then generalize that label to other behaviors. But if you can make that label and identify with it, then you don't need to run the marathon in order to do the hard thing. You just need the label.
What are the hard things that people should be focusing on more? What are the step change function, hard thing capacity skills that people should focus on more?
I think it's being cognizant of what outside forces are influencing your behavior in a way that is aversive or against your goals. And so if you're like, I want to start a business, but I am afraid of what other people will say, then it means that we are allowing those other people to control your behavior. And I think when you say it in really plain terms like that, you're like, wow, I didn't know I was giving them that much power for my life. It's like, I am not doing this because of them, which means they control me. And to me, like the hard thing is in some ways just not allowing that control to persist or to keep going.
It is interesting how many people can do hard things physically, but can't do hard things decisively.
I have, our security team and whatnot, and this is a discussion that I've had with probably each of them at different times because I've seen combat and death and all that kind of stuff. And what's funny is that like the amount of risk that they are willing to put their physical bodies in, like literally their lives at stake, but then how that doesn't necessarily translate to being able to have a like, call it vulnerable conversation with a wife, spouse, lover, etc. It's just interesting. And this is again back to like, these things don't generalize. They look good, but they do not mean the same thing.
It's weird that we publicly admire the obvious hard thing, even if that isn't the one that actually makes the biggest difference to people's life direction. It's not predictive of being a good friend. It's not predictive of being the best partner. It's not predictive of being a successful business owner. But because it's more obvious, because it's more publicly laudable, you can flex it online and you can tell people, I ran a marathon, as opposed to when my partner asked me a difficult question, I didn't shy away from it. I told them the truth.
And to be clear, I think that those things are laudable in and of themselves. Like you go fight a war, you go run a marathon. I think all of those things are praiseworthy. It's just the generalizable component of that hard being, oh, I can do all hard things is really the misconception. But I do think that if for whatever reason you tell yourself a narrative that because you did this hard thing, you can do all hard things, then that's amazing. And by all means, if someone's like, I started doing jujitsu and it completely changed my life, it's like, that's awesome. But it probably isn't because you learned how to do guard better. It's probably because like what learning to do guard meant for you changed these other series of behaviors down the line.
How correlative do you think it is, people that do hard things physically versus people who develop the capacity to do hard things that matter?
Can you say that again?
Let's say that doing hard things electively versus doing hard things decisively. The big difference between the two to me seems to be decisions that require emotion and decisions that require effort. That seems to be one of the big delineations here.
So it's like call it hard conversation versus hard physical task?
Yeah, and how many people who develop the skill to do hard physical tasks as a transformation, how many of those do you think carry over into being able to do the hard thing emotionally?
Probably the same in the opposite direction. The guys who are like, can have quote hard conversations, the attorney who can get through all these complex ideas and have whatever then sucks on at jiu-jitsu or sucks at in the weight room or doesn't try hard. I just think that skills are more specific unless you generalize them.
How do you generalize?
I think it's creating labels and identity with personality. And so if we define personality by the aggregate of how you behave in all conditions, right? So all these conditions, how you act is your personality. The label we ascribe to that personality would then be the identity. And so if we decide to change that label, then that label, this is getting a little technical, but basically becomes a global reinforcer for your behavior. Like I am honest. And so we make this label, and then honest has a lot of sub behaviors underneath of it that we then act because we believe that honest is good. And so we want to act in accordance with this global reinforcer for ourselves. And so when we enter a new situation, we think, okay, what is in alignment? What behavior is most aligned with this label? And then we do that. And then when we don't act that way, then we feel guilty because we broke our own rules of behavior.
So the big lesson here is just because you're doing hard things in one domain does not mean that it crosses over into all domains unless you purposefully try to make your identity wrapped up around it.
1,000%. I'll say when I remember when I went to college, I wanted to pledge a fraternity, and it was in the SEC, and they're known for hazing and whatnot. And so I called my dad and I was like, hey, this might be like bad. I might have to go through some stuff that's hard. I don't know. And, my dad's given me a lot of lasting gifts, but one of them, he said, think about every hard thing that you've gone through up until this point. He's like, there is nothing that they can do to you that is worse than that. And that actually was incredibly empowering. And I remember when there were more hardships that were going on, I just immediately went to the worst things that I had gone through. And I was like, oh my God, this is nothing. And so I was able to like go through this relatively hard thing where there were people who were like cracking and crying and all this stuff. Like, I want to say grown men, but I would say adult boys next to me. And I was able to stand tall because it was just like, there's nothing that these other 21-year-old guys can do to me that I have not suffered through.
It's a good justification for doing hard things. That Rogan's got this line, the worst thing that's ever happened to you is the worst thing that's ever happened to you.
Yeah.
And if the worst thing that's ever happened to you is somebody misspelling your name on a Starbucks cup, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
But if the worst thing that's ever happened to you is 1,000 times worse than that, I think one problem we have is recency bias, that if you haven't been through a tough time right now, your memory of being able to deal with hard things, you kind of get velvet prison syndrome. And sometimes you can forget. Like, I guess chicks would say, like, I'm still that bitch. Or I've still got that capacity. Sometimes we forget.
Yeah, I think one of the strongest frames that has gotten me through those harder times is that this is the story I will one day tell. And so it just like almost the more bad things that happen, it's like the more epic the story becomes. And so, I mean, and the main beneficiary of the stories that we tell is ourselves, because we're the giver and the receiver of most of the stories. By percentage of stories told, we are the biggest receiver of the stories. And so I think that's actually been, I think, just such a powerful frame for like, of course this terrible thing will happen, and like, doesn't that make the story so much better?
Yeah. What's cool is, I think when you say we're talking a narrative, story, personification, arc, hero's journey, it all sounds kind of wishful in a way, mythological, irrational, symbolic, but that's the way that humans' brains work. Like, we work in story, and even if it's not strictly the way that the neuroscience behind how the medial prefrontal lateral cortex works in order to make us a tougher person, if you are the kind of person that tells yourself the story that you're the kind of person that can get through this, that is functionally exactly what you're chasing. Like, what you're after is the story. And by putting that on the front end and going, okay, I'm just going to keep on building stories that I'm going to refer back to in future, I think you're actually being more direct than if you were trying to take a more rational view of exactly how behavior is put together. Like, the story is the rational view of how your behavior and your identity are put together.
There's a lot there. I think like with the neuroscience and the brain labeling and all that stuff, I have no idea. So that's above my pay grade. But yeah, I just think about all of our behavior is just in aggregate. We do what we've been rewarded for doing. And it doesn't mean we get a cookie. It could also mean a bad thing goes away. There's a lot of different types of reward. And so if we remember a story, so like, let's say you have that story of you went through this hard thing and then you survived, then it basically serves as a reminder of the reinforcer of the behaviors you did to get through it. And so it's almost like with a kid who's smaller, if you're like, hey, remember last time you did this, you got ice cream. If you remind them of that reward, then they're more likely to repeat the behavior. And so I think we basically use that narrative as a reminder to, in the short term, increase the relative value of a reinforcer. And so if we think about like, what is motivation in general, That's functionally what you're doing if you motivate someone. Like if you sell someone something for the short term, you increase the relative value of a specific reinforcer. You didn't wake up wanting to buy cologne, but you see an ad, and for the short period of time that the ad goes on, it increases the relative value of smelling good. And so as a result, it changes your behavior, and then you buy. And so I think stories function in that same way, where we use them to motivate ourselves in the short term to do the desired behavior that might be less comfortable in the short term, but we're reminded about the larger reinforcing event that we had in the past.
How many people do you think are doing hard things publicly in order to not need to face the lack of capacity they have to do hard things privately?
I don't know them, so I don't know, to be honest with you. That's my honest answer. I don't know. I think some people really do hard things, and that's what they capture online is a fraction of what they really do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there are people who 100% of the hard things they do are online, and they're not even that hard.
Of the hard things they do online.
Yeah, and they're not even that hard because they've got a squad of people behind them. Like I think there was a meme around this for a moment that was like, but you had a camera there. It's like the girl collapses because of crazy news or something like that. It's like, but you had a camera there. And so there's just this element of,
mistrust, performative nature.
Yeah.
The 3-step process of how to win. Number 1, realize no one is coming to save you. Number 2, take responsibility for your current position. Number 3, be willing to sacrifice who you are for who you want to be.
I think that those 3 is really all about power. In the realization, so probably in sequence, probably the first one should come first, which is you own everything. It's like, okay, if I own everything, then you could still hope that someone saves you, but it still relies on someone else to change your condition. And so it's like, okay, I own all these outcomes. I'm not going to rely on someone else to change my condition, but you're still there, which means you have to take the 3rd step, which is that I have to sacrifice. I have to give up something in order to get something else. And I think where people actually stay stuck the longest in their careers from an entrepreneurship perspective or just from a personal development perspective is the trades that we are unwilling to make. It's basically the desire to have everything at the same time. And the easiest analogy I have is like, it is totally reasonable to want to have a mountain view and to be on the beach and be walking distance from a Whole Foods. But you probably will not find a place that has all 3 of those because they are all at apparent contradictions or apparent odds. And so so what happens is we just stay in this paralysis of indecision because we feel like all paths are settling. And I think there's this movement or narrative around like never settle and things like that. But people mistake never settle for never make trades. And so we have this obsession with optionality or optionality maxing, but options are only valuable when taken. And so when we never take the option, which means we don't cash in the option that we have available, like some options need to be taken. And when they are taken, other options disappear because just having maximum potential does not mean maximum reality.
Because you need to commit.
You have to commit, which is the elimination of alternatives. And so like show me anything that was worth doing that did not require commitment, which is an elimination of alternatives, a trade-off. And so in the beginning of our lives, when we're younger, we are praised for maximizing our potential, right? How can we have as many colleges accept us? How can we have all the best grades? How can we have all the paths in front of us? But I think many people know people who are really successful earlier on for maximizing potential, but not realizing potential. And I think the gap between the maximization of potential and the realization of potential is the commitments that we're willing to make, which is the trades, the elimination of the alternatives, when we have to start cashing those options in and realizing that some of them are never going to come to fruition because we can only have one life and some of those trades are permanent. You can only not have a kid until you have a kid. And then at that point, you've have a kid. Right. There's no going back, right? Some decisions in life don't have refunds. And I think that is what I would say maybe in the earlier part of my career, especially single guys, because I think a lot of that's like really prevalent in social media right now, is just options maxing. But we just, even in the attempt to options max, you still close off other options, which is that like you will not have the benefits of, let's say, a committed marriage
early on. because
Right.
you've kept your options open.
Right. And like you will not have the benefits of like a very large business if you try to pursue 5
Mhm.
or don't pursue any because you want to not make commitments. And so I think that commitment is actually a really strong signal for maturation and growing up.
Lots of mistakes were made by standing still. Like people think that inaction isn't a decision, but it is.
Totally. I mean, your conditions change through inaction still.
Mhm.
Like doors close. There are moments where you have opportunities where you have to act or they will go away.
Yeah.
And so I think it's like being able to seize those opportunities. And that means that you have to actively say no to something that you might want or might want a lot. And I think those are the traits that I think being willing to make those trade-offs clearly and trade them for the things that you want more is how people can progress through life and get more of what they want.
The pain of having to accept trade-offs holds a lot of people back.
100%. And then they end up getting nothing. And I honestly think that is like at the crux of why so many people are not realizing any potential at all, is because they are unwilling to make any trade and then make the biggest trade of all.
How do you think about overcoming that decision paralysis? Lots of good options in front of you. Spent a lot of time trying to maximize surface area of available options. And it's insane to say, but it's functionally true for humans that more options make you more miserable, not happier.
Super true. And also, we probably know someone, I mean, I can think of people off the top of my head that didn't have many options, but the option that they had was very clear. Like this guy is a super nerd and just loves coding, and it was very clear, straight on. And so there was a lot of things that weren't available to him physically, probably wasn't going to be the sports star, maybe even in super great shape. But like, it was almost like that path was predetermined. But then when you fast forward, it's not like they're less successful. It's that because they just already knew what they were going to do, they got to start pulling the future forward down the one path and start walking. And so there's, again, this like fetishization of having options and seeing that as a proxy for status, when the reality is that they're all blank checks. You haven't cashed any of them in.
Yeah.
And so I think the original question ladders to like, people get stuck because they don't know what they want. And I define what you want by what you're willing to sacrifice to get something.
Take responsibility for your current position. What's that mean?
It's identifying yourself as source. And to be clear, it doesn't mean that like your position in reality is 100% because of you, but so this is a invalid but more useful way of going through life, which is that it absolutely might not be your fault, but it is still your problem. And since you are the only one who you can influence directly, then you are the one who is source. And because like you could still be correct in saying that like, because I insert grievance, insert, trauma, insert genetic predisposition, insert zip code I was born in, or language or poverty level or whatever it is. All of those things could be true, and yet you still have to take action as the only source that can change it.
No one's coming to save you.
Yeah, which goes back to the first one.
The interesting thing about no one is coming to save you also means no one is coming to stop you.
I think some people might. I think actually as soon as you start, I think the lobster or crab analogy in the bucket is so true. I actually think that the hardest, I mean, I think for me, again, like the hardest part of entrepreneurship was the first set of friends that you have to relinquish. Because once you do it the first time, you realize that you will still survive, you'll still make it through, you'll find new friends. But like in the first time, it's sacrificing everything you've known and loved for something that you've never experienced and hope will happen and have no idea if it actually will. So the cost is known, the payoff isn't. And that is why I think it is the riskiest and why so many people struggle to make the jump.
Yeah. Did you know your gut controls your energy, your recovery, how well you absorb everything that you eat, and the one nutrient that keeps it all running properly is fiber? Well, it turns out that 95% of Americans don't get enough of it, which is why I'm such a huge fan of Momentus's Fiber Plus. Most fiber supplements are a one-trick pony, one type of fiber solving one part of the problem. Fiber Plus is a 3-in-1 formula built to tackle digestion, gut barrier strength, and blood sugar stability all at once. I use this every single day. It is kind of hard to get enough fiber just through food alone. And best of all, Momentus offers a 30-day money-back guarantee. So you can buy it, try it every single day for 29 days. And if you don't love it, they will just give you your money back. Plus, they ship internationally. Right now, you can get up to 35% off your first subscription and that 30-day money-back guarantee by going to the link in the description below or heading to livemomentus.com/modernwisdom and using the code modernwisdom. A checkout. The world will reward you in proportion to your courage, not your intellect. The most dangerous person in the world is the one who continues to show up every day, even when the rewards are not guaranteed. Your potential is determined by the amount of uncertainty you're able to tolerate and how long you can tolerate it for. You can beat 99% of people if you can master the shame of rejection, the boredom of repetition, and the pain of feedback.
I was asked if you could transfer only one trait to your son, what would it be? And I really thought a lot about it. And I was like, of all the traits, what would I transfer? And I think it's courage. Because if you don't have courage, nothing else matters. Like you can't take any action. You can't do anything worth doing. You can't stand for anything because you have no courage. And so I think that's why it's so much more preferable to be a failure than a coward. And I think that I would hope that I could transfer just that lesson and try and reinforce as many times as I can in his upbringing that like you have to take jumps and you have to lose and you have to be willing to lose, and then realize that losing doesn't actually make you a loser, because losing is the first signal on the path to winning. But like not playing is the actual signal for a forever loss.
What is courage to you?
It's a really good question. I need to define it better. Being willing to take action where there's a large short-term cost with an uncertain delayed benefit. So if you want to start a business and you think that you're going to get made fun of or snide remarks or like, oh yeah, you're doing your podcast thing again. Oh yeah, don't miss out, right? You know, don't want to miss Friday night because it's your big podcast. You know, you're going to suffer that short term. That's a known cost. And then the payoff is delayed and uncertain. Like not only will it come later, if it were guaranteed, if you knew you were going to make $1 million doing a podcast, then you'd be like, whatever, fuck it. Like it takes significantly less courage. But I think it's the fact that it is unknown and delayed. So you basically have to be willing to get kicked in the nuts and multiple times and sometimes for extended durations before the hope that you will get something. But I think the only way to get through that kind of kicked in the nuts period for however long it's going to be, is realizing that you have two paths. One that is guaranteed, which is that the path you're currently on will not get you where you want to go. And the other path, it is not guaranteed to get you where you want to go, but it's the only one where you have a shot where you do.
And that's where your potential is determined by the amount of uncertainty you're able to tolerate and how long you can tolerate it for.
And I think that also goes to the bigger the games we play, right? Like the longer the game you play, the bigger the game you play. And so if you want to create rockets that go to the moon, you have to be able to deal with uncertainty for just an absolutely absurd amount of time compared to most humans on any endeavor.
There's a line at the end, pain of feedback. I'm interested in that.
I mean, rejection hurts, failing hurts. And I think when you give it your all and then the market, society, the universe, whatever, determines that you are still not enough, that is very painful. I think that in time, you learn that feedback is fuel rather than failure. And once that new association gets paired, I mean, you've had plenty of incredibly successful people on this podcast, and I would say many of them have this same kind of, I would call it lesson, is like, it's not failure, it's feedback, or it's not failure. But it just means that like fundamentally they have a different pairing for losing. And so everyone has to go through this because like losing is good. And feeling bad about losing is good because it forces you to change. And that change means that over time, as long as you're changing in the correct direction, you get better.
Or else you would continue to do the strategy that caused you to lose last time and you would just run it back again.
And this is why I have this like, I thought on the way over here, I was thinking about this, and like I think one of the big losses or failures of society right now is that we are trying to castrate the teeth from the pain of loss. We're trying to not allow kids, people, the feeling to feel bad. It's like we have determined that feeling bad is bad, but feeling bad is not bad. Feeling bad is a signal so that we need to change. Because if no one feels bad ever, then it means that everyone is doing what they want to do all the time. And that is not how a functioning society works. Sometimes people do stupid shit and need to know and feel bad for it.
Eventually, reality is going to come into contact with your decisions.
Yes.
And the more that that's put off, the less likely you are to come up with a way to avoid that reality coming into reality.
And so the way that, right now what's going, and this is probably the more frightening part about like some of the media that's out there, is like trying to just redefine reality and create a fantasy where you losing and you feeling bad isn't true, but it doesn't change reality. It just changes someone's perception of it for the short term. And then they have to pay reality back with interest and time. And like the check always comes due. It's just like the interest is much bigger. And so in light of, my son, my child that I have in the future, like I want him to experience the pain of loss so that he can learn. Because like, how else can you learn? You have to. Otherwise, it's everything's quote, going by feeling. And then also somehow thinking that feeling bad is bad. And also that feeling good is good. And there's tons of things that you can probably do that feel good that are not good. And there's tons of things that you can do that feel bad that are not bad.
Well, what a gift to give somebody to say you can feel bad and not feel bad about it.
Yeah. And that's okay. Like you lost. What will we learn? What will we do next time? Great. Do it again.
That feels like resilience.
Yeah.
As opposed to any time that you feel this emotion, which is negative, that is worthy of rushing in and panic and control and distance. That's almost like a formula for fragility.
So laddered onto this, I know we haven't talked about it, so this is fun. Is the idea that we need to, like that because you feel bad, it means that the path that you're on, like you need to change something. And so it's equal opposite, which is like, okay, if we know that we're on the path getting kicked in the nuts right now, and I know I'm on my 17th or 100th podcast and I'm still not like a millionaire yet. I have not achieved what I want yet. It does not mean that I have to change course.
But earlier on, you said that bad feelings, feeling bad, are important to update the way that you're approaching this situation. So how do you distinguish between the two?
No, and I would say what you hit on is the crux of it, which is judgment, which is like, and this is one of the hardest ones, is like, how do you help someone recognize patterns of when you need to, basically it's the eternal question of when do I push and when do I pivot? Right? When do I push through the hardship versus when do I adjust?
Am I giving up on this set in the gym because I'm being a pussy, or am I giving up because I'm about to injure myself?
Yeah. And so
pivot. I like that.
Yeah. And I've worked with this a lot because it's a pretty classic entrepreneurship issue of like, do I have product market fit, or like, do I need to just keep pushing? Where am I just trying to push up a hill? Is that if one of the fundamental assumptions that you began your quest with has been proven untrue based on the feedback, then that is where pivoting makes sense. So if you said like, I think that I'm going to create a doggy skateboard because I think that a lot of dog owners will want to buy skateboards for their dog. We'd be like, and I believe that the percentage, like, and I want to make $1 billion doing this. That would mean that there's this size of the market. This percentage needs to be the take rate in order for me to get that market share. It's like, okay, if I talk to 100 dog owners and none of them want to buy my doggy skateboard, I would not say that is a push situation. I would say that is a pivot situation because our fundamental assumption that we started this quest with is false. And so we need to take that feedback and then pivot. If, as we're going through, they're saying, maybe, but like, I don't know what you have in your hands. What the hell is that? So it's like the assumption is not proven, but it's more of an execution issue. And so it's like, okay, I just need to get better. I need to push through. But I'm saying it is definitely one of the harder lines to know, like when should I push, when should I pivot? What lesson do I learn from losing? Because losing teaches you shit, and we just need to make sure that we learn the right thing. Like teaching will occur.
Yes. Whether you take it away or not is
Yeah.
up to you.
I hired my first employee and he was a fuck ass. Therefore, all employees suck. Right. So like losing will teach you something. It's just want to make sure that we learn the right lesson.
I feel like this is a justification for making early decisions as right as possible.
Oh, 100%.
To try and avoid that PTSD of it's far easier to learn something than it is to unlearn something. Probably 100 times easier to learn something than it is to unlearn something. If you've drilled a particular habit, a particular bad habit, if you have come up with a mode of interacting with your employees or the world, because all of your employees, the first 3 employees you get, all of them fucked you over.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally you get to the 4th, you have to unlearn all of the compensatory mechanisms that you built on the first 3. Now that you've got someone who's worthy of that and you're restricting their progress, you're slowing everything down, you're being hypervigilant, it doesn't feel like a good place to work. Try and make your early decisions right.
Yeah. Changing a behavior with a long history of reinforcement is harder than changing one with no history.
You're such a hardcore behaviorist.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the only thing that's made sense to me in the world. Like, it's
Skinner pilled.
I mean, it's just, it's just my reality. So I'll say it differently. Like, many people do not get what they want. They look up at their lives and they're like, this is not what I want. And so if you don't have what you want, it means that the model that you view the world through is incorrect, or you have the correct model and the incorrect variables or insufficient variables. That's basically all it is. And so for me, the more I have looked purely at inputs and outputs, the more I've gotten my predictions correct. And so I have been super reinforced for using this style of thinking. And so I do it more. And so it's just, and like, I read some of my old stuff and I'm like, oh man, like I could have said this in half as much words if because it's understanding why. Like at the most basic level, it's just understanding why. I'll give an example. And I think this is why the vast majority of the world like walks around confused, which is, I don't have what I want. That didn't go the way I expected. She took that worse than I thought. So you're constantly surprised by reality. And so in a simple sentence, like Johnny stole because he's dishonest, right? Most people would nod their heads and be like, yeah, Johnny stole because he's dishonest. But we say, what does dishonest mean? Dishonest means it's a label, right? That we ascribe to somebody who does a series of different behaviors, one of which is stealing. And so if we were to restate that sentence with the broken down definition, it would then be Johnny stole because he's the type of person who steals, which is circular and makes no sense. Because the real reason that Johnny stole is because he's been reinforced for stealing in the past, or he saw someone who got reinforced for stealing and then modeled their behavior. That is why Johnny stole. And so because of that basic misunderstanding, most people have these words that they use to explain the reality that they don't actually understand. And as a result, reality fools them more often than it should.
He was rewarded for it, or he was punished for doing the opposite of it.
Exactly. And so what I just explained is the difference between description and explanation, which is relatively heady and I think difficult sometimes to grasp, but is at the most basic level, like my worldview.
This is what happened. This is why it happened.
Why? Yeah. And so from that one kind of basic understanding, everything else can kind of pretty much get laddered up. And so, said differently, if I wanted to tell a child, get good at basketball, right? I would not tell him, get better at basketball, because a 5-year-old would be like, I don't know how to do that. What does that mean? So I'd be like, okay, well, let's break it down. We've got dribbling, passing, shooting. Okay, do that. A little bit closer, but they still probably don't know how to. If I say, go get better at dribbling, passing, and shooting, still can't do anything with that. Until eventually I'd be like, okay, passing. So I want you to take a step with your left foot towards the person, and I want you to extend your elbows and finish with your thumbs down. And if the ball goes towards them in the direction that they're running and they catch it, you've passed successfully. And then I would repeat that chain of events until eventually they would understand that that chain of behaviors equals passing. And if they do it a lot and they hit the target many times, they would be good at passing. And we'd repeat that all the way down until they're good at passing, dribbling, shooting, etc. And then eventually we'd describe them as a good basketball player. But that basic unbundling and rebundling of terms is why I think the vast majority of people are wildly confused by what's going on around them. Is that someone says, why don't you love me? And he's like, what are you talking about? He's like, I pay the bills, I take out the trash. Like, like, what do you want from me? And she says, like, you don't tell me I'm pretty. You don't hug me. Like, you don't listen to me you don't ever ask me how my day's going. And it's because for her, she defines love in these behaviors and he defines love in these behaviors. And so then they fight forever rather than just saying like, what does that mean? What does that mean? We had 2 employees that were arguing about something at acquisition. And one was like, hey, can you, I would be fine if you were just like kind and polite to me. And I was like, okay, what does that mean? And there was obviously a moment of like hesitation there because it's like, okay, so you want the other person to guess what you think in your mind means good behavior, but you've never articulated it. And so you want them to guess and somehow get it right.
Mm-hmm.
And so finally it just was like, can you ask more questions rather than making more statements? And the other person was like, yeah, sure. It's like, great. But that basic thing now, and they're fine now and everything's great. And so, but like, this is why I view the world in behavior, because I have wanted things, but I didn't know how to get them, which happens in reality. And so as long as I live in reality, I prefer to define things through reality, and then reality tends to behave far more as I predicted it would.
Before we continue, most people in their 30s are still training hard. Their protein is dialed in. They sleep better than they did in their 20s. Discipline is not the issue, but recovery feels somewhat different. Strength gains take a little longer. The margin for error starts to shrink. And that is why I'm such a huge fan of Timeline. You see, mitochondria are the energy producers inside of your muscle cells. As they weaken with age, your ability to generate power and recover effectively changes, even if your habits stay strong. MitoPure from Timeline contains the only clinically validated form of urethylene A used in human trials. It promotes mitophagy, which is your body's natural process for clearing out damaged mitochondria and renewing healthy ones. In studies, this supported mitochondrial function and muscle strength in older adults. It's not about pushing harder, it's about actually supporting the cellular machinery underneath your training. If you care about staying strong into your 30s, 40s, and 50s and beyond, this is foundational. Best of all, there is a 30-day money-back guarantee plus free shipping in the US, and they ship internationally. And right now, you can get up to 20% off by going to the link in the description below or heading to timeline.com/modernwisdom and using the code modernwisdom at checkout. That's timeline.com/modernwisdom. And Modern Wisdom at checkout. On the I want you to do this, but I didn't tell you, it's that Neil Strauss line, unspoken expectations are premeditated resentment.
Right.
Like, why didn't you do this thing that I didn't tell you to do?
Yeah, probably not deliberately, because I think a lot of people do it not on purpose.
Of course, but it's a unconscious premeditated resentment.
Yeah.
The investment that you are making will be a resentment in future that you aren't aware is about to come about.
Yeah.
Another thing on the people's map of reality is inaccurate. I think one of the most obvious realizations that you can have when you hear somebody who complains a lot is that their framework of reality is incorrect.
Oh, by a mile.
A complaint is you saying, why is reality not delivering that to me which I anticipated?
Yeah.
And reality doesn't care. Reality is just going to continue to deliver to you that which it is giving. Why is there all of this traffic on the way to work? There shouldn't be all of this traffic. I didn't anticipate all of this traffic.
Yeah.
I assumed there wouldn't be traffic. Reality disagreed with me. Reality is not wrong.
It's undefeated.
Reality is undefeated. Yeah. It's 1,000,000 TKOs.
So this is really, I mean, I can talk about this as long as you want. You know this.
Of course.
So what this becomes really interesting is how often this misconception of reality causes people to get fooled and keep the wrong people in their lives and keep sometimes the right people out of their lives. And so I call this malicious benefit or well-intentioned harm. And so on one hand, if there are a number of people who make, let's say, negative videos about you, they intend to harm you. But when you look at your media and the way that you are compensated through the impressions that you earn and the amount of relevance that you have, you make more money. And so though they intended to hurt you, they have taken their time and effort, which you normally have to pay people for, and then for free promote you. What a gift. It just means that they are incompetent at doing harm, which is wonderful. You want all your enemies to be incompetent in their harm doing. On the other hand, you have somebody who loves, I'll use this in quotes, right? Loves you, means you well, but is also incompetent. And as a result, whenever they enter your life gets worse. They cause negative consequences to occur. And so a lot of people care a huge amount about intention. And this was one of the larger shifts that I think happened in my, I'll call it career, but just my life, was completely stripping people of their intentions and only looking at their outputs. And that made navigating relationships significantly easier for me because it allowed me to remove the noise from the signal of the person. And so there are some people, like, I mean, honestly, the reason that this is like probably the very beginning of this kind of thought change was with Layla. Like I had an advisor, if you want to call it that, at the time. And I was like, I'm not sure if I want to marry this girl. I don't, help me, make this decision. And he said, well, just look at your stats. And he's like, are you in better shape? And I was like, well, yeah, she eats healthy and she goes to the gym. So I go with her. And he's like, okay. So you're exercising more. You're eating better. Okay. Are you drinking as much? He's like, no, she really doesn't drink. And I like drinking. I'm probably a bad influence on her. He's like, okay. So she decreases this kind of negative thing. Okay. Got it. And he's like, what about business wise? I was like, oh, I'm making more than I've ever made. And she's helping me do that. And he was like, okay. And so he just went down the list of all these different kind of components of my life that I could measure. And he's like, it seems like your life is significantly better with this person in it. And when I contrast that to some of the, call it relationships I had in the past, it was almost the opposite. Like I would get into the relationship and all of a sudden I wouldn't work out as much and I wouldn't eat as healthy and I would go out more and my business would suffer. And so like all the things that I cared about would go down. And so even though I don't think that person had any malicious intent, I think they had good intent, but they had well-intentioned harm. And so that lens has helped me make so many decisions in a way that removes a lot of the emotional weight behind them, which is like, oh, I absolutely believe that you are a well-intentioned person. I was like, I just think you're very incompetent at doing good for me. Like you do not have the skill to help me.
I'm not prepared to be the collateral damage of your good-intentioned errors.
Yes.
As you spin around trying to give me a hug, but by accident punch me in the face.
Yes.
Like you're driving down the street and because you didn't mean to but weren't paying attention, you ran somebody over. Functionally, the difference between that person being dead because you didn't mean to because you were texting on your phone or because you're a bad driver and you swerving off the street to hit them, the outcome is the same.
And this is something that our society actively disagrees with because if we look at how our laws are written, we try to tease out intention and we change punishment and consequences based on intention.
Is that not important? To a degree?
It can be, but I'm just more saying, I'm not saying should or shouldn't, but I'm saying in terms of how you navigate getting what you want out of life. If you were the one who got hit, you're dead either way. Mm-hmm. And so when n equals 1, I would look at the signal, what happens, rather than the intention 100 times out of 100.
Is there any space? It sounds like, for as long as this person in my life benefits me,
mm-hmm.
It's good to keep them in, and the moment that they stop benefiting me, then I get rid of them.
Mm-hmm.
To some people, that would come across as a very transactional view of relationships.
I think it assumes a binary of benefit, not benefit. And most people have many things that they do. Like, let's say you're like, I'm married to somebody. What happens when that person stops serving me? Well, it's very unlikely that tomorrow someone goes from, I help you in these 100 ways to I either hurt you or help you in 0. It's more common or more likely that you had 100 ways and now 10 years later they help you 70 ways and maybe 10 years later they help you 40 ways. But if you're at least cognizant of the 100 ways that person helps you, then it allows you to articulate, hey, when you do these things, it helps me a lot. It would really mean a lot to me.
Reinforcement again.
Yeah. I mean, and I appreciate the yes. But like in different terms, I was gonna put my Chris hat on. It's just good communication. Right? Like, how do I know what you want until you tell me? And I think that people say what you just said, which is people would see this as transactional. And then I would say, and? Yes, and? Why is this wrong? Why have you decided that having an exchange is incorrect? It's how society works. All of capitalism, which is the best societies, have been built on exchange, voluntary exchange.
I think some people would feel icky about applying that exchange capitalism dynamic inside of friendships and intimate relationships.
I think that exchange happens either way. They just don't want to say it. If you have a friend and you are like, oh, we're ride or die. It means you have a long history of reinforcement, which means you have a long extinction curve. It just means that you've been reinforced many times for this friendship, which means that you're willing to deal with blips. But the amount of blips that you're willing to deal with is proportional to the history of reinforcement. If someone new comes into your life and has almost done nothing good and then does a blip,
You don't have as much ballast in the system.
exactly, you have no reason to. So basically the extinction curve is functionally just how long you're willing to hope that the good thing comes back.
You probably should have a degree of recency bias, though.
Oh yeah, because if the person's behavior has changed, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's always discounted.
Someone that was 50% a good guy and 50% an asshole, the 50% that is closest to you is more salient than the 50% that started 10 years ago.
Oh yeah, if it was front half, back half, 100%. And honestly, and this is like, I think this is super relevant for a lot of people, like people do change and that's okay. And you can be friends with the person they once were and no longer friends with the person they are. And that's okay.
Mark Manson dropped this unreal line that reminded me of you.
Okay.
Do hard shit. Not because it's fun, but because the win actually means something. You bled for it. You broke for it. You earned it. Easy wins are forgettable. Hard ones change you. That's the point. And it's your line. Everything is hard and no one cares.
I'm sorry accomplishing your dreams wasn't fast, easy, and risk-free. Like, they wouldn't be dreams if they were. And you wouldn't call them wins if they were easy. Because they would just be you tying your shoes. And what was once a win when you were 5 is no longer a win when you're competent. And with increased competence comes increased stakes. You have to be willing to bet more, put more on the line to win bigger. Which means, like, if you're a billionaire, playing $10 hands of poker is a complete waste of time.
Gabe from I Prevail, he's the drummer from I Prevail. You will always think you suck. That's okay. It's okay to suck compared to your standards. As you grow, so will your standards. That doesn't mean you actually suck.
I think it would just be the actuality of sucking versus the perception of sucking.
Correct. It's that as you increase in capacity, you increase in standards.
Yeah.
And given that your standards will always outstrip your capacity, there will always be this felt sense lack between where I am and where I want to be. But yeah, that Mark Manson line, I think, is really important in sort of an era of AI because you can speedrun or shortcut getting the outcome without putting in the requisite inputs. Now, because everybody's obsessed with leverage and trying to get as many outputs from as few inputs as possible, that does make sense. But when you begin to fully detach it from it and you don't focus on the journey that got you there in the same way, and you're not scrutinizing the outputs with the same level of finitude and resolution
Because it was
that you
lower
used to.
cost. Yeah.
Yes. And it's not just the outputs that matter. It's not just the output. And this is where the sort of leverage crowd doesn't fully come into reality. It doesn't come into contact with the way that humans are telling themselves the story of their life. If you could come up with some sort of super quick code that would write $100 million leads for you, the entire project would feel different. Your process of getting that, it could be word for word the exact same. Take every word that I've written and create this book based on this brief. Dink.
Mm-hmm. I would prove that AI knew a lot about leads, but not me. And I think that, I think this sits at the discrepancy between saying the output of your life is who you become and the aggregate set of behavior that you've learned over your life, or if the output of your life is the stuff that exists as a result of you being here. And that is more of a philosophical question than I think it is a like right or wrong. I think you can make arguments for either side of like the purpose of your life is what changed as a result of you being here.
What you did or who you became.
Yeah. Or the purpose of your life is all of the outside only existed to change the inside. And I think there's arguments for both. I would say I have strong affinity towards both definitions because I would say that when I go through harder times, I lean more towards like this is happening for me. And when I'm going through easier times, it's like I am happening to it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm happening to reality.
But the binary of that, seeing it as only one or the other, will create a kind of fragility. If all that you're focused on is outcomes, then you're never going to think about becoming the person who can generate those outcomes, because you're going to find shortcuts that don't necessarily work. And if you're only ever focused on inputs, you're never going to actually work out if all of this suffering amounted to anything. Show me some. George in the house last night was reading one of these books, and he wasn't happy with the way that the author had put together the sentence. And he says, show me something I can drop on my foot. That was his line. Like, I can't drop anything on my fucking foot with this. Show me something I can drop on my foot. It was wishy-washy, vague language. Do you remember the park bench scene in Good Will Hunting?
No, I haven't seen it long enough ago. Yeah.
Sat on a park bench, Robin Williams talking to Matt Damon about love. And he has this line. He says, love is an active commitment, Will. It's a choice to value someone else's well-being as much as your own. If you watch the film, you'll know that he doesn't say that. He says this instead. You wouldn't know about sleeping sitting up in the hospital room for 2 months because the doctors could see in your eyes that the term visiting hours do not apply to you. It's the same thing, same idea, right? Idea, picture, words. And that is the order, not idea, words, pictures. Show me something I can drop on my fucking foot. That I can drop on my foot.
It's clear language. Both of them, both of the examples. I think it's interesting because with the drop on your foot, it's like, I think the picture is obviously like more emotive, and because of that can be more motivating, more persuasive, etc. Where I think the drop on my foot part, where I have struggled as a human being, is taking that idea and saying, I want to do that. I want that type of love. And then saying, well, the person I love is not in the hospital, and I don't have the opportunity right now to sleep standing up and have a doctor know that visiting hours don't apply to me. What do I do? And so then it does go back to what I'm willing to give up in order to maintain something. But
it's interesting when there isn't that level of pressure. You know, when you brush up against the grain of life, when you're swimming into the stream, it's very easy to see effort because the whole world is bearing down on you, so there's an enemy to go up against. I think when things are easy, it's like, okay, well, what does love look like when things are easy?
We talking relational love?
Yeah.
I think it's really, well, I'll just say more how I measure it. But I think it's just what you're willing to give up in order to maintain something. And so if I have a relationship and I have somebody that I love a lot, then I'm willing to give up everything, including my life, in order to maintain that relationship. And so, or for that person, or for that idea, for freedom, for the country. If you love something a lot, you're willing to give up everything for it. And so when that person asks you to do something or doesn't ask you to do something and you think that they would still like it, then you are willing to inconvenience yourself to a large degree in order to do that. And I think that like the reason this stuff is so valuable for me is that like it allows me to both give the things that I think the other person wants or that they've told me they want, but also how to differentiate who is using words in order to try and manipulate me. When someone like, dude, you know, I love you, you know, if it was bromance, obviously. But then you could say, what have you given up in order to maintain this? In what way have you inconvenienced yourself in order to maintain this relationship? Because all of the actions you've taken out of convenience, and this relationship has been only beneficial for you, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But there will come a time where our needs are at odds. And in that situation, I would like to know how reinforcing was all the other stuff so that it is worth. Basically, it's saying like, how much good was the good for you so that you're willing to deal with some bad?
Can that lead to a situation where you almost purposefully try to seek out difficulty in an attempt to stress test relationships? Because
I wouldn't.
Not all relationships should have it. The glorious friendship would be seamless between you and another guy, and there's never anything you have to navigate, and it's all just beneficial and positive in both directions.
I have a friend like that. We've been friends since 6th grade, and I don't think we've ever had conflict, which is great and rare, and that's why we are still friends. But no, I think that it's okay for conflict to occur. It's okay for seasons of friendship to end. But you can measure how good of friends you are by how. And I don't know how much inconvenience he might be willing to deal with me, but it just so happens that we really haven't had any need for conflict or competition. He's an FBI agent. And so his measures of success, like he has zero, there's no jealousy, there's no envy, there's no anything. It's just like, how many bad guys you catch today? And he's like, bro, you got to hear this one. Right. And so we could just, and he's like, and then he'll just ask ridiculous questions about money stuff because he just thinks it's funny.
Yeah.
So, and that has worked out well, but.
Most people have no idea where their testosterone levels sit. But what if I told you there was a solution? Something that identifies low T faster than a high school bully, and it won't cost you all your lunch money. That's where Function comes in. Gives you access to over 160 lab tests, including a deep dive into your full hormone panel. Every result is reviewed by clinicians. Anything out of range is flagged, and you get clear explanations with a personalized protocol with actionable next steps. So if something's off, you know exactly what to do about it. Whether you just need to go to the gym more or you need to play Creed louder in your car, Function will tell you exactly where your testosterone and everything else stands. Normally, this level of testing would usually cost thousands, but with Function, it's $365 a year. That's $1 a day to stop guessing with your health and start knowing. And right now, you can get $25 off, bringing it down to $340. So get the exact same blood panels that I do and save $25 by going to the link in the description below or heading to functionhealth.com/modernwisdom using the code modernwisdom at checkout. You're behind because you're in a rush, and you're in a rush because you feel behind. And you feel behind because you're in a different season than the people you're comparing yourself to. You're not behind. You're just early.
Yeah, it's measuring the output difference with without comparing the input difference. I think it's basically it. It's like, why isn't my podcast like Rogan's? And it's like, okay, well, he's got 10 more years. I don't. You would know the answer to that, right? 10 more years and however many more podcasts, more. And so it's okay. Well, if I were to match that and have done it back in time, would I have the same? Would I be bigger?
With the same skill. With the same.
All of that. And so it's comparing outputs without comparing inputs. And I really just think it comes down to that at the most basic level. Now, most of the time, you are early because most people who make that, I would call it error in judgment, are earlier in their careers. And I also don't think there's anything necessarily wrong. Like a lot of people are like, comparison is the thief of joy. I don't agree with that. I think comparison is how you measure things. Like this is the discrepancy. Labeling the discrepancy as bad is the thief of joy.
Yep.
Comparison in general is how you can know what the discrepancy looks like between what you want and what you have so that you can fix it. So we should compare. Absolutely. You should compare yourself to Rogan. I'm just using you. But like, I should compare myself to Elon. Of course I should. So I could look at the massive discrepancy between me and Elon. And that just gives me clarity on what things I need to do to try and decrease that.
How do you think about getting rid of the label of bad?
I think that the first action you take when you have not been reinforced for an action, you do through modeling. So, and this is why we do these types of podcasts, I assume, is that if you haven't done the hard thing or the hard thing that you want to do or taking the bet or taking the risk, we look for other people who have been the penguins who jumped off the edge first. And was there an alligator? Well, no alligators for penguins, but polar bear at the bottom to eat them? Or did they swim and get to the next iceberg and then they found whatever? So we look at other people. And so modeling is a very real way. It's how you learn everything when you're a child, is you look at what other people do. Good things happen to them. Okay, I'm going to do that. And so in the short term, we model. The long-term play is that once you take that first step, ideally you don't get eaten by a polar bear, and instead you also get a fish, and then you go up and then you get reinforced for that. And then basically every moment after that is your own experience becomes the loop. But the first jump comes from looking at whatever everyone else does and then takes the jump. Now, where that's so difficult to do is that you're looking at what everyone else is doing, or at least the people that you want to emulate, which is, really important. Like, don't listen to the people closest to you, listen to the people closest to your goals, which is not necessarily the same people, often not. I want to listen to them, I want to model their behavior. But then also still ignoring all of other people. So it's like, I'm listening to these people, I'm ignoring these people, but behavior is tough because you're still valuing other people a lot.
Yep.
And so I think this is why so many, I would say, again, I come from the entrepreneur side, but like successful entrepreneurs have a very first principles approach of thinking, because at some point, no one has gone to the moon. And you just have to say, like, does physics prevent me from doing this? And then when you reason everything from the ground up, you're able to find discrepancies between what people believe and what's true. And that's obviously where opportunity exists.
You're David Deutsch-pilled with that. Does physics prevent me from being able to achieve this? If not, then I just
possible.
Yeah, it is possible. Yeah, I think one of the reasons that these episodes resonate is that a lot of people who want to do things aren't around people who know how to do them.
100%.
And the harder the thing is that you're trying to achieve, the rarer it is to find people who are able to support you in the doing of it, and not even just support you, but give you legitimate advice about how to get that.
I 100% agree, and this is something that I've struggled a lot with, because what gives you the credibility to gain media and attention is being exceptional in some domain most of the time, and being exceptional in a domain makes you unrelatable. And so it's kind of this very difficult catch-22 where
credibility and relatability are inverse,
right? But like, to your point, poor people are surrounded by other poor people and then assume that that is everyone, because it's everyone they know, not everyone that exists, but it's their everyone as far as they're concerned. And I think that's what makes it so difficult in the beginning to get out of that first bubble, is because you have to look outside and look at some people who might even appear unrelatable and try and grasp at the straws of their character, their origin story, where, again, people could hear me say that I slept on the floor, that I didn't have enough money, whatever. But like, they only see me not then. No one's interviewing the gym owner who's sleeping on the floor, who's going to someday become something, because they don't know yet.
That's your one regret, or one of the regrets that I have that's the same as yours, which is I didn't track the early journey enough.
If anyone is listening to this, I'm not a big advocate of regrets in general, but like, a behavior that I would have changed that I don't think would have changed the outcome is like, document. And you don't have to share it publicly. Just take pictures, take voice notes, email yourself, whatever catalog you want. I remember one of the most important personal moments that I had was when I lost everything for the first time. I screenshot my bank account. So I went from having, 6 successful gyms to losing all of it and having $1,000 to my name. And I remember looking at my bank account and I was like, wow, that's what the bottom of the barrel looks like. That is, and I hadn't, seen a number that low in a very, very, very long time. Even in high school, I had more than that, just because I had jobs and I didn't have expenses. And so, I screenshotted it, and it was this very cathartic moment for me, because I was like, never again. Like, I will not let this happen. And I will have this be part of the story I tell. And I still have that screenshot.
I've seen it.
And I show it because, like, so basically, you want to document it because you believe that you will be the hero that will overcome. And I think that if you can really just grasp it, like just beginning the documentation story, like even the fact that Kanye had some of those early videos, it's like he believed that he would make it and he believed he would use it. And so I think one of the greatest things you can do is, and it was almost like at that point, like I believed when I took that screenshot that I was going to win, and I did believe I was going to get it back. And so the earlier you can have that realization that, like, I have to document this monster, otherwise I won't be able to tell the story. And the story, the receiver of that story, biggest beneficiary of that story is you.
I wish that I'd done the same. All the way back in my previous life, there was a period in my placement year. I would have been 20. I was living in Scotland, and one of the problems that you have with running businesses in events, especially long single outcome events, is that it's all costs until you finally get to cash in the revenue. And there was a dwindling pot of money that we had because we were putting all of this time in and driving from Edinburgh to Glasgow to Stirling to Dundee to come back to hand out flyers, to manage the guest listers, to restock the bars with the t-shirts, to sell the thing. And the event wasn't going to happen for another month. And that just meant it was all output. I needed to pay for my gym membership, and I needed to eat food, and I needed to drive to these different places, dwindle. And we're not going to get to withdraw this money until it happens. And I had a friend who came to help me hand out flyers because my business partner needed to look after Freshers Week in Newcastle, and I was going to look after Freshers Week across all of Scotland. I had my friend who came up, a bit of a rough dude, but nice guy. And he'd grown up in serious poverty in the northeast of the UK. And this was the first time that I was out of money, zero money. And I could have rung my parents, and I'm sure that they would have sent me some cash, but I had too much pride and I felt too ashamed to do it. And there was this moment where we were in this flat on Sauchiehall Street in Edinburgh, on the far side of Edinburgh. Dean Park Road on the other side of Edinburgh. And I was saying, hey man, like we're out of food in the house and I don't know where we're going to get it from. He's like, oh, don't worry, man, I'll just go and steal some. And his background from his upbringing was that when you run out of money, you go and steal food. And I remember thinking,
yeah, it's wild.
I've got myself to the point in life where stealing food is a realistic decision. And that, do I want to video my friend Dean like stealing sandwiches from the Tesco around the corner? Probably not. But the fact that that story only exists for me in my mind, and then the only way that I can communicate the lessons that I took from it and the way that it made me feel is by having to go through this retelling. Capture shit, especially in the beginning.
The worst case scenario is you delete it. Like I'm just saying, for like, what's the downside of doing it? The downside of doing it is that you quote don't use it and that you delete it. But the upside of having it as an artifact of kind of the stepping stones of who you wanted to become, I think is invaluable.
Everything looks like luck to the unskilled. Ignore them.
Yeah. You have to have skill in order to perceive and recognize skill. You have to have a base level of skill. Now, you don't have to have the same level of skill as somebody else, but the greater skill you have in any domain, the more you appreciate the skill of somebody who's exceptional. So, for example, if you don't understand the rules of basketball, it's just guys passing a ball around and you don't know who scores or how it works or why they're wearing different shirts. Like, you have no understanding of what's going on.
Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a great example of this.
Yeah.
No idea. Is that good? Is the guy?
Is he winning?
Yeah. Who's winning?
Yeah.
Who's winning?
Right. And then the greater your skill, the greater your appreciation for how good someone is at that thing.
Tighter resolution, more dexterity.
100%. And so, like, for that reason, if people who are around you as you begin to walk, up the ascension of beginning to get successful, you have your first signs of life, like, oh my God, this might actually start working. And you get angry, only speaking from experience here, when people attribute the success to luck rather than effort. The reality is, one, there was probably some luck. Two, they don't have the skill to recognize your skill. It's a question of competence, not malicious intent. And I think just defining it that way has made it significantly easier for me to realize. It was like, oh, they don't have the ability to recognize what I didn't, because if they did have the ability to fully comprehend the skill that it took, they would be able to do it too.
Mm-hmm. Mark Manson, James Clear have got an idea that's similar to that. You only envy the lives of people whose sacrifices you cannot see. It doesn't make sense to continue wanting something if you're not willing to do what it takes to get it. If you don't want to live the lifestyle, then release yourself from the desire. To crave the result but not the process is to guarantee disappointment. You only envy the lives of people whose sacrifices you cannot see.
Yeah, I love Jimmy Carr's people want what you have, but not what you did to get it. It's just so good. I think the first time I heard that, I was like, fuck, I wish I'd written that.
That was on this pod.
Yeah.
So good.
I wish I'd written that. But yeah, and I think part of it is just like, it goes back to what we started with around trades. It's like, they're just price tags. And you can totally say that something costs too much. Like, that is good. Like, those shoes are nice. They're not worth $1 billion or whatever that relative.
To me.
Yeah, to me. And so I think that being able to say, like, I think it is okay to say something is both good and not worth it. And people have a hard time with that. So they say it must be bad because I'm not willing to pay the price for it. But it's like, they might be great shoes. They might not be worth it for you, but they're still good shoes.
I think what particularly hurts is when you, as a person who's put a lot of effort in, see the price that you paid to acquire a skill, and it appears to be dismissed by somebody that doesn't understand it.
Or when you buy the shoes and then someone says, I can't believe you bought those shoes. There's no way I would ever do that. And you're like, I know you would never do that. That's why you don't have them. And it's okay that you don't have them either. I'm not saying that as a judgment on you. It's like, you don't have the shoes. I do. I thought they were worth it. You didn't. And guess what? We both are different people who live different lives. And so we have stated the obvious.
In other news, Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce companies in the US. They are the driving force behind Gymshark and Skims and Alo and Nutonic, which is why I partnered with them, because when it comes to converting browsers into buyers, they are best in class. Their checkout is 36% better on average compared to other leading commerce platforms. And with Shop Pay, you can boost conversions up to 50%. Basically, you didn't get into business to learn how to code or build a website or deal with the inventory stuff bullshit on the back end. You just want to get down to creating and promoting an awesome product. And Shopify takes all of the mess off your hands and allows you to focus on the job you actually came here to do, designing and selling the thing that you love. So upgrade your business and get the same checkout that we use with Nutonic with Shopify. Right now, you can sign up for a $1 per month trial period by going to the link in the description below or heading to shopify.com/modernwisdom, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/modernwisdom. Avoiding people who make it harder for you to achieve your goals is the highest form of self-care. The fastest way to change your life is to get around people whose minimum standards are your life goals.
It's like I violently agree with both of these statements that I wrote.
I agree with me. It'd be great if you didn't agree with you.
I was like, whoever wrote that is a fucking idiot. This is at the heart of and I wrote that right in the thick of my thinking around malicious goodwill, or malicious benefit and well-intentioned harm.
Yep.
Was just I think I had some people around me at that time that had done me harm and had said, but I didn't mean to. I had good intentions, and if you were telling that as the person who was texting and driving to the wife of the person whose husband you killed, I think they are justified in not caring. And I think that if that person who continues to drive while texting afterwards because they lack the skill to not drive without texting and continues to run over your spouse or whatever, you are justified in removing them from your life despite their good intention. And I just think intention is desired result, which is like, if my intention was this is what I wanted to have happen. And it's literally just a lack of competence. And competence is incredibly rare. So it makes sense to remove many people who are not competent at helping you. And
well-intentioned, but incompetent.
Yeah. And so I think that's why being really clear about like, hey, if you do this would help me. This decreases my risk of failure. That would be helpful for me. Makes serving, and I say that like serving you as a friend or as a spouse or as a whatever, you give people the tools to help you. And I think that you should totally do that. If you give someone the tools, and then they choose not to help you, then I think you are also justified, or it would be rational for you, if you value your goals more than you value the relationship, to sacrifice the relationship for the goal. And again, we would say which one you love more by the one that you're willing to give up.
The harshest truth every young man must eventually learn is that everyone was always rooting for you. Your parents want you to be a great son. Your wife wants you to be a great husband. Your boss wants you to be a slam dunk hire. Every first date you've ever been on, they've been rooting for you to get laid. Every time you started to tell a joke, people hoped it would have a hilarious punchline. Your proximity to anyone is a reflection of themselves, meaning the deck is never stacked against you, and your failures are completely your own. Denzel Rust.
I was like, who wrote that one? It's all your fault. No one's coming to save you. Sacrifice who you are.
But people aren't against you, especially the people that are in proximity to you. People's proximity to you is a reflection of themselves. We hang around with people who we want to be like and who we want to win so that we can be in the collective glory of it.
So this is where the worldview, I think, is super important for me, at least, which is like we hang around people who've rewarded us for being around them. Mm-hmm. So either they remove stuff that we hate or they give us stuff that we like. And I think where it becomes difficult is where you have competing priorities, where you have multiple things that you like and you want to shift. It's where you begin to change. Basically, your motivating factors start to change, but your environment hasn't. And so what was once reinforcing for you or was once rewarding no longer is as much. And so this is where people feel this tension between desired of like, this is the life I want to live versus the life that I have.
Trade-offs.
Yeah. I mean, I've given a tremendous amount of thought to trade-offs, and I really think it comes down to that, is that people are just unwilling to make trades.
Why? Experientially, why?
Because we want everything. And when we get everything we wanted, we no longer want it because we have it. And I think there's this amazing comedian, I think his name's Kanan. I'm going to mess it up, but he has this awesome bit on this. It's like more philosophy than comedy. And he says, all the joy is in the getting. He's like, but once you get it, you just have it. He's like, and getting, so much better than having. Having, he's like, but the only thing worse than having is losing. And then you lose it, and all you want is to have it again. It's like a 2-minute bit, and he's like, you don't get kids, you have kids. And he's like, you are have, and that is why you will never be satisfied.
But yeah, you only either live in the desire or in the have.
Yeah.
And the have is unsatisfactory, and the desire is always compelling and out of reach.
Layla has been talking to me about this more recently, where she's like, the things that make you, us, etc., like very good at business is always seeing where things could be better, where things could be improved. And it's this incredibly, you said earlier, these habits that have been reinforced, these grooves of behavior that lots of water has run through, right? And being able to live life with 2 modes, I find incredibly difficult, which is like, all I am in one part of my life is dissatisfied and seeing the imperfections in what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And then the key to satisfaction of life is saying everything is great, or rather I accept everything as it is and I do not wish to change it. And I think that conflict is, I would just say, just one that I've not conquered, just one that
It's
I
that line
walk
about
through.
Problem to be managed, not paradox to be solved.
Yeah, dichotomy. Yeah, exactly. It's a problem to be managed, not a dichotomy to be solved. Yeah. Yeah, I don't, and I think many of these things, like there is no, number 42, that's the answer. Like that is the answer to this. I think we do the best we can. And I think, again, to the question that the started with, which is why do people have such a hard time with trade-offs? Which is that the trades, we don't want to make the trade. We want to be able to date everyone and have the benefits of a committed relationship. And when you begin to walk down one of those paths and see the other one start fading into the distance, people have an emotional reaction, and then they change course, and then they flip-flop back and forth between these 2 things, but then they never actually get to realize any of them.
Because loss is more painful than gain. If you lose £5, it is more painful than finding £5. And that means that you're always going to try and avoid loss as opposed to expedite gain, even if you would be happier by doing that, because the pain of the loss is always going to be felt more
and probably short-term, long-term as well.
Yeah. Bill Perkins has got this line. He says, people will endure years of misery to avoid a couple of minutes of pain.
Oh my God. Yes. Incredibly true. And again, if we think about motivation, it's just that short-term pain is always immediate. And so it always motivates you not to do it. So you have many motivating operations that are working on us at any given moment. And so even though something is short term, like even it's funny because like many people, obviously there's some people who just love going to the gym. There are significantly more people who don't love going to the gym the moment they get to the gym. Then you warm up, then all of a sudden you feel good again, right? But there's this period where you're like, I don't necessarily want to go right now. And so you have a motivating operation at all times that is working against your best wishes or your best desires. And our goal of motivating ourselves is to tell ourselves those stories so that in the short term, we can overcome the short-term discomfort so that we can get the long-term benefit that we ultimately want, that we know we want, but we're reminded. And the first time you work out, it only looks like pain. And then we look at somebody else who's already done it for a long time and say, well, I want that. Yeah. And so we model that and we borrow that credibility, that outcome of the penguin that jumps off the cliff.
That's
and so like, I want the fish. So I guess I'll try and do that. And then after that, the loop takes over.
It's like hyperbolic accounting rather than hyperbolic discounting.
And it happens both ways. So like, for example, if I want to set an alarm, right? If I set an alarm at 5 o'clock for the night before for 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to wake up super early and I'm going to do all this shit, right? We get the benefit of the idea of our productivity when we set the alarm, but the cost is discounted because it's in the future. But when we have to pay the cost, it's immediate. And so the benefit of hitting the snooze button is immediate. And the cost of getting up is also immediate. And so we hit the snooze button. And so it's like that I feel like that is the microcosm of humanity, of setting an alarm 12 hours before or 8 hours before you're supposed to wake up and being like super jacked about it because you only get the benefit and there's no price attached to it. But then in the moment that you have to make the trade, all of a sudden your priorities change because the mode of your operations have changed.
Yeah. And the long-term benefit of what will happen to your life if you become the sort of person who gets up early is also in future.
And if you do it a few times in a row, then you tell yourself, I am the type of person who does this. And then that becomes a second operation, which can help you overcome the short term. Like I'm a big believer in I am statements as motivating operations, meaning like I am this type of person. I tend to be really hesitant to say I am statements because I believe they're very powerful in terms of changing behavior. But it's also something that I feel like I listen to a lot when I'm talking to other people. Like, this happens a lot, especially in dating. The thing about first dates, second dates. People are like, well, in the first meeting, they'll give you like 20 I ams. Like, I'm a neat freak. I'm a blah, blah, blah. Like they just give you, okay, here's my lattice work of my beliefs about myself. When in reality, all of these things are just shorthand for a number of behaviors underneath it. They're saying, I'm great at basketball and I'm also great at swimming. And you're like, whoa, there's so much here. But where it gets difficult is when you need to stop dribbling and start passing. But you said I'm great at basketball, but I'm supposed to do both, but I actually need to change only one of them. And that's where people get into these really hard times, which is why I think defining everything at the granular and then moving it back up, but being able to go clouds to dirt on these definitions of behavior allow you to change who you are much more fluidly. Because you understand that the label is actually just that. It's just shorthand. It's not reality. It's just a bucket to make communication easier.
If I can't be bothered to describe all of the things that this particular term means.
And it would be unreasonable. If I had to say he's a good basketball player, but instead of saying that, I'm like, oh my God, he's really good at taking his right foot and putting it in front. Like it would be ridiculous. But you have to understand at that level in order to communicate really clearly, in my opinion.
Yeah. This tension between excellence and satisfaction is an interesting one. I had this line this year, which was, what you are praised for in public, you will pay for in private. A lot of the time, the things that make you fantastic operator when it comes to business and your career often can be totally maladaptive when it comes to the kitchen table.
Competing priorities. And I like, this is one that I think a lot about this. Because there is a priority. There is one that you want more. And I think people have a lot of trouble with that.
This is why people who are monomaniacal often get so much further than people that don't, because even just the thinking cost of navigating the trade-offs, that's why someone asked me basically how monomaniacally should I go after my career? And I said, well, it depends on what phase you're in. But I think it is almost impossible to make a big swing, make big progress in your life without going complete sicko mode for an extended period of time.
Yeah, it's about 10 years. Yeah. I mean, I think it's like about 10 years of just going,
I'm not going to compromise.
Yeah. It's no compromises. Yeah. There's this episode in Breaking Bad, and the title was, I think, No Half Measures. And I think it was about whether you punish someone or kill them, but that was but I remember watching that episode and the line stuck with me a lot, like no half measures, either do or don't. And I think that half measures yield null outcomes.
Yeah, it's not that you get half results.
Yeah. And so what many people are plagued by is they are doing half measures in 4 domains and have yielded none. And they feel like they are trying all the time. They're working every hour that they're awake to pursue or serve 4 different masters. And it's the realization that compromise on one means getting neither. And I think that people have a hard time with that because they're unwilling to say, I want one thing more than another. And I think you just have to be able to say, like, I'm willing to sacrifice this thing, not forever, but for now.
Obligation, because of anchoring bias, because of the momentum of where you are now, because of the fear of regretting it. This is where the inaction thing comes back in. People think that inaction has no cost, but it does have a cost.
Usually it's higher. Like, it's like money loves speed, wealth loves time, poverty loves indecision.
Mm.
And if you think about inaction, as an action, we are always doing something. Even if you are watching television, you are taking an action. It's just not making any progress. Well, maybe you're making progress in a show. Maybe you're making progress in your relaxation. Maybe your resting heart rate drops. Like things are always occurring. And I think it's just whether we are voting with our behavior about the outcome that we truly want. And most of the outcomes that we truly want happen at a delay, which is what makes them worth wanting, but also makes them equally hard to get.
Don't listen to other people's opinions. Friendly reminder that most people are fat, poor pansies, and don't listen to them when they try to deter you from whatever it takes to succeed. The average person will always try to keep you average. It makes sense that if you want to be extraordinary, you will do things that an ordinary person would see as extra. This is the really hard part that I had to come to terms with. It's that a lot of people want to see you fail because it justifies the risk that they chose not to take. We always have to think about listening to the people who are closest to our goals, not closest to us.
We yearn for the approval of many people who don't have lives that we want. And so if they have a specific life, then it means that is what they think is valuable. And if we don't want what they have, then why would we value their weight on our decisions?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like you have this, they're like, we have this mold that is my life. Your life no longer fits my mold. And you're like, right, I don't like the pot that mold makes. And so somehow when people state the obvious, which is that you are living your life against my preferences, we somehow feel like that needs to change because when we're younger and growing up,
we can't leave.
Yeah, you can't leave, and you do need to live your life according to your parents' preferences, your teachers' preferences, your classmates' preferences, your principal's preferences. But when you get older, you do have to break the mold and decide what mold you want. And in so doing, you will be against their preferences. And if the vast majority of people have a life that you don't want, then you're going to do things that the vast majority of people don't agree with.
Mm-hmm. I think the average American adult is obese, likely to be divorced, and has less than $1,000 in the bank. Doing what everybody else does sounds like a great idea, but it's actually a reliable route to a life that you're probably not looking for.
I feel very passionately about this particular topic because it means that the path to exceptionalism is lonely. And loneliness is something that we decry as a society, that there's something wrong with it, there's something bad, there's something wrong with you if many people disagree with you. But success and pursuit of large endeavors is one of those few domains where everyone disagreeing with you is a signal that you are actually doing something different. Now, sometimes you doing something different is the wrong move. I think Larry Ellison said this. He said, if everyone thinks your idea is stupid, either they're right or you're right. And if you're right, then you're likely to make a lot of money. I'm loosely paraphrasing, but basically it's like we have to be willing to do exceptional things in isolation and deal with the pain of rejection And some of rejection isn't people saying, no, I don't want to buy from you. Some of rejection is people just rejecting your behavior, rejecting who you're becoming, rejecting the choices that you're making. And I think that rejection oftentimes is harder because it often surfaces as snide remarks, jokes that are demeaning, that have a little bit too much edge to them, like a little bit too much truth.
Or even just being excluded, a more silent version of that, not commission, but omission. Oh, we won't invite them out. Oh, you turned up to squash practice. I didn't know it was on. I just thought that, I don't know, do you guys not tell me? Oh, yeah, well, all right, come on, join.
Yeah, those moments. And I think those moments are very painful. But you trade those moments for the many moments when you're at home, alone, looking at your life around you and saying, this is not what I want.
I don't want to be here.
Right. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be who I am.
And I don't want to be there with them either.
Right. And so it's no man's land. And I think that is like the beginning of the metamorphosis. It's the beginning of the transformation.
It's the single most powerful idea that me and you have come up with, the Lonely Chapter. By far. And I think the reason that it speaks to people is that the amount of doubt that you have to endure when doing this for the first time, when nobody around you understands what you're trying to do, when you're actively being discouraged from making changes and you have no promise of glory or success on the other side of it, is one of the most perfect cocktails of pain and discomfort that you can go through.
And this happens on every mountain. So it happens on your first mountain and it happens on your second mountain. Like if you've achieved some level of success that everyone around you deems as successful enough by their standards, not yours, when you pursue the next summit, all of it begins again. The machine begins again.
I actually think that for a lot of people, the first big lonely chapter that they will feel will be after their first success. Because for a lot of people, the first success is done within the frame that they're already inside of. They get to the top of it and realize it wasn't what they wanted. And then some people decide to go back down. Maybe some people don't need to go up the first mountain to realize they're somewhere they don't want to be. But for a lot of people, especially people that are driven and push toward excellence, I think they actually have to get there within, this was my story, right? Getting one of the biggest events companies in the UK, running an organization that is cool and fun, and I got to define, and I was the boss and everybody knew me, and there's some wealth and some status and some freedom, and there's girls. Everybody's telling me that this is something that I should be happy about and satisfied with. And for some reason, it didn't feel right. And the only way to try and find something new is to let go of something that everybody else is telling you is something that you should want.
Local maximums. And it's like the furthest up they can see up the mountain. And then when you get to that new local maximum, you have a different perception than they do, and you can see the next peak and they can't. And
some people don't need to go up the peak, but I think a lot of people do.
Yeah. I
wonder if those are different types of lonely chapter. I wonder if there's a different type of a lonely chapter of letting go. I've kind of been, hold that thought. I really wanted to talk to you about the difference between having fallen off and having never made it. And having fallen off a lot of the time is somebody going from one local maxima to another local maxima that's higher, or to a global maxima. Like, sure, some fall-offs occur not through choice, but that evolution might be somebody going, my priorities have changed, and you are judging me on the scorecard of the game that I used to play. I'm not bothered about that anymore. Oh, that guy fell off.
And I have two completely different thoughts about this. One is short, and then I'll make the longer one. I realized when I was writing something a while ago that when you have no evidence or no proof that you're going to be successful, everyone will ask why you're working so hard. And then once you win, everyone asks why you're working so hard.
You know, that was the Mark Manson one that he said will tell you how lucky you are.
Oh, is it?
And
did
you liked the idea of...
Oh.
No, they just ask you again why you're working so hard. Yeah.
And
it was a funny remix.
Yeah. And it was just a realization that people were literally always going to ask me why I was working so hard, or why you were working so hard, and why you're pursuing your goals, because they're saying that your goals are not the goals that I would pursue, and to which you would respond, yes. The second thing was I was talking to an entrepreneur, really successful, and they were saying, hey, I really want I want to dominate my market. I want to put everyone else out of business, blah, 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 blah. And I, as somebody who has put people out of business, I will say that it doesn't come with parades and it doesn't come with balloons, and it's not Goliath versus Goliath, because by the time you actually beat them into true submission, it's really like a giant beating a child, because it's almost never a true fair fight. And there are no rules and there is no referee and no one determines you the winner. And so what ends up happening is you get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then they shrink into irrelevance. And then you see a Facebook post that says that they've changed their goals and that they actually determined that this isn't as important to them as it once was. And I think that, one, that's okay. Two, it's not satisfying at all. Three, when you see the jobs and the employees that actually worked at the company that were just, living their lives and have kids, and all of a sudden, like, this idea of this conquest that you're going to beat someone feels significantly less rewarding.
That's glorious.
100%. And I used to joke that when losers lose, they change their goals rather than say they lost. And I think it's more that they might have at some point while they began to lose, maybe it's the first quarter or the second quarter of the game, they're down by a few points. They might have some awareness of what it would take in order to win, but they determined at that point that the trade was no longer worth it.
Yep.
And I think that that's okay. And I would say that is a shift that I've had personally, is that if someone no longer determines that the price is worth it, then amazing. They've made a conscious decision. What I would say I advocate against is having that decision made for you, because you weren't conscious of the decision being made to begin with, and then just basically accepting it.
Can vengeance be deranging in that way then?
Say it again?
Can vengeance be deranging?
For whom?
The desire to get one over on this person, it compels you to act in a way which is being puppeted by them in a very odd way.
Yeah, they control you.
Yeah, the person that you're trying to beat has cajoled you and tempted you into doing something that isn't necessarily in your interests. And then when you do reach the finish line, they're never going to say, well played, man, fair fight. Yeah, exactly. No one else knows. It's largely just this silent war between you and your projection of them.
And to be clear, like I think that vengeance and revenge can be incredibly motivating. And if the only fuel that you have is that to get what you want, then use what you have. But I think that the outcome of it, of beating a specific person, is not nearly as fulfilling as you think it will be. But if along the way you can create good from it, then I think that there's some reconciliation of pros and cons that happens, of like, good stuff happened, bad stuff happened, and is there more good than bad, that we sum up at the end of our lives. But I find it interesting when I look at like the oldest, the old wise men that I pay attention to, or that I read their dead books, or they're dead, the books are alive. It is interesting how much they talk about like the folly of youth, and how much we value things that never really mattered to begin with. And I try to think, like, what is that guy going to say about what I'm currently doing, and will he approve of it? And to be clear, I feel like I always have the answer, but I think it takes the edge off both sides. On the downside, if you do, have your losses, it's like, well, this is okay. And on the upside, when you do have your wins, you're like, I'm not that important.
A lot of this feels to be about the expansion of time, being able to see things on a broader time horizon. Is that fair?
Time and space. I think those are the two things that can shrink or expand anything. Right. So like if we zoom in to the atoms of this table versus zooming all the way out to the cosmos, all of a sudden, whether two monkeys are having a podcast that they're recording matters significantly less. And also when we think about the billions of podcasts that get recorded over the next however many years, it shrinks it. But in this exact moment, this becomes the most important thing that I'm focused on right now. And so I think playing with time and space as ways to cope with hardship is one of the most valuable tools that you can have in terms of getting through
to
hard
zoom
times.
into enjoyment, zoom out of difficulty.
Of pain, yeah.
You can get competent at nearly anything in 20 hours. The problem is, most people spend a decade delaying the first 20 hours. More potential is wasted through inaction than incompetence.
I saw a TED Talk years ago where a guy talked about how he learned how to play the guitar in 20 hours. And that TED Talk changed my life, not because I learned to play the guitar, but all of a sudden, complex tasks or seemingly complex tasks felt much more attainable. Where I was like, okay, I might not be the best website developer in the world, but in 20 hours, I can have a website. And that 20-hour mantra for me has just been like 2 days, 2 full days, 2 10-hour days, fully focused. You can pretty much go from zero to not hero, but zero to competent. And when you string hundreds of those 20-hour days together, I think you become incredibly dangerous. We were talking earlier about Range, the book. I think being cross-departmental, being
multidisciplinary.
Thank you, disciplinary. Multidisciplinary is hard to calculate how valuable it is because the first 20 hours of almost every discipline is probably the biggest, most meaningful concepts from that discipline.
From not being able to ride a bike to being able to ride a bike.
Yes. Being able to not read to read, even if you can't read Shakespeare, but you can read all of a sudden like 80%.
Well, the world of Shakespeare is now opened up to you. It's just a matter of time before you get there.
Yeah. And even if you could never read Shakespeare, the 80% of the books that you can read as a result of a 6th grade reading level is basically more books than you have time to read. And you will get the largest returns from those first 20 hours. And so there's a very strong argument for trying to collapse the time between wanting something and beginning those first 20 hours. And because the 80-20 of the skills you gain that have utility, like that your usefulness across a huge amount of domains is multiplicative, not additive. So I've said this example before, but like, Jay-Z in the very beginning, it's like he might have had some rhythm or something. And then all of a sudden he, learned how to rap. And then he learned how to sell. Now, some people say maybe it was sold earlier than that, but I'll just leave it there. He learned how to sell. And then all of a sudden he learned how to market. And with each of these additional skills, his income didn't go up by like, 1 + 1 = 2. It went, 1, well, 1's a bad number. So 2 to the 10th power all of a sudden becomes significantly greater than what you can do. And so when unsure about what step, like when you're not sure what to do, build potential. Because when the opportunity does come, you want to be ready. And so it does make sense in the beginning of your career to maximize optionality. It's just that you have to be willing to trade it in. And so when you're not sure what to do, the logical thing to do is, I don't know what I'm going to do tomorrow, but I'm going to get a good night's sleep. I don't know when I'm going to meet a mate, but I'm going to start getting in shape now. I don't know what I'm going to sell, but I'm going to start building an audience and making content. There's always an argument for if you don't know what to do, there's still plenty of things to do. But the goal is not necessarily to do those things forever. It's to do those things to then use them as the launch pad to get the thing you really want.
The trap is opening up so much optionality without the concordant decisiveness that you end up being trapped.
Yeah.
You end up being stuck because you think, I've got all of these directions that I could go in. I've spent all of this time building up a panoply of routes that I could take my life down. And I do not have any ability to decide on which of those to take.
Panoply.
You like that?
Myriad, cornucopia, a plethora.
Yeah. Two people that are obsessed with language have a war with each other. But one is British, so he wins. You only need to get rich once, so you might as well work as hard as you can to get it done as fast as you can. The fastest way to attract what you want in life is to deserve it by doing so much work it becomes unreasonable not to achieve it. Do so much work, it would be unreasonable that you fail. The seat at the table is yours if you want it. Do the hard work, build the skills no one can ignore, adjust your mindset to match where you want to go, then pull up a chair and sit down. You want to work with such relentless obsession that when people see you, they're grateful they don't have to compete against you. The fastest shortcut is to stop looking for shortcuts. Do the work.
Are those all mine?
All one.
Violence is the answer. There's two quotes in the first few pages of our sales handbook at TurnItLateAcquisition.com. One is volume negates luck, and violence is the answer. And I would say that those are like credos that the team lives by. And I think
violent team.
They are, and violently successful. I think there's a lot of power in knowing that you're doing every single thing you possibly can to win. Because if you can look at yourself in the mirror and say, I have controlled the controllable, I think there's some level entirely the controllable, not the uncontrollable. Those things can happen. I could do my book launch and there can be a lightning strike and there can be no power in Vegas. That can happen. But in the event that that happens, if you leave it all in the field, if you have nothing left in the tank, I don't think there's a feeling that's more satisfying as a man than knowing that you've given everything that you had to give to an endeavor that you deemed meaningful. And so Layla and I have this thing that we say a lot, but a man must have a quest. And I just really, really like that. It's like you need to do something. You need to go towards something. And your quest could be being the best father. It could be being the best musician or the best podcaster or the best businessman or the best tire replacer or the best sweeper. Whatever it is. But like I think being questless, being aimless, and never being able to use the violence that you are capable of in the pursuit of an endeavor that you find meaningful is where people find themselves lost and without hope. Because hopelessness comes from a perceived lack of options. We don't know what to do. Anxiety comes from many options, but no priorities. And so there's many things to do, but we aren't sure which one. And so a quest remedies both of those because you have one path that you're clear on and you know the only thing that you have left to do is destroy everything in your path to getting to where you want to go. And I'm using strong language on purpose rather than saying that you literally need to destroy everyone, but more so the ideas, the thoughts, the doubts, the perceived risks that aren't even really risks. Those are the things that we have to march triumphantly towards. And I think having someone in your corner who believes in that better version of you is one of the rarest gifts that you can have in life. And there's a line from 300 that I love. The Queen says to Leonidas, she says, come back with your shield or on it. And I think that we all want a spouse or a partner who can reward us for the good fight, because what that queen is saying in that moment is not like, I want you to win. She's like, I want you to die trying. So, and I think that's like all to be fair, that's literally all we will do is die trying. All of us will die trying. And I think, rather all of us will die. Some of us will die trying. And I think that's about as good of a life as I think anyone can really ask for.
One of my least favorite groups of people are those without a quest mocking those who have one.
Wastes of space.
It causes doubt. This is another reason why the Lonely Chapter thing resonates so much, that people who are in it have their certainty about wanting to get out of it diminished by people who can't see the fact that they're in it. And you go, fuck, all of my friends are saying, well, why are you staying in? Because you want to go to the gym in the morning. What does it matter if you miss your workout? It doesn't matter if you miss your workout tomorrow, dude. Go, no, I really, really want this thing. And my wanting of this hard thing and the efforts and sacrifices and trade-offs I'm having to make in order to get there, the doubt that already exists inside of me is being multiplied by people who are outside of it. And if I could give everybody a gift, it would be the ability to turn down the volume on people who don't understand the goals that you're trying to achieve. It shouldn't be your job to explain yourself to people who don't understand what you're trying to do. And the confusion of this person gets it and understands it, and this person doesn't. You shouldn't be listening to them at equal measure.
I have a lot of live translation that I think I've wired into being able to handle some things that were difficult, which is like, I pretty much translate all hate into you live your life against my preferences. And so whenever they're saying all of these things of like, no, you don't have to go to the gym. We were doing this other thing. It's just saying you're living your life in a way that's against my preferences. You're valuing things that I don't value. And you're like, you're right. And so it doesn't mean like we don't need to have the same values, at least in the short term. And I think just accepting that that is okay and that you can still be friends, at least in the short term, is fine. And what they're really trying to do is get you to comply with their way of living, because maybe, not always, when you live in accordance with your new values and new preferences, it brings into sharp contrast how they are not living in accordance to theirs.
Yeah. This was 10 years ago when, as a club promoter, I decided that I was going to take 6 months off from drinking, which now sounds like commonplace. Now is almost a caricature of something lame that people do too much, and drinking has come back around. But 10 years ago, I was on the fucking frontier. And I remember when I stopped drinking, so many of the people that I would hang out with went from being surprised to ribbing mockery to almost offended. And I think a lot of that was people realizing, oh shit, the fact that Chris has stopped drinking throws the fact that I need to drink in order to feel social into harsh contrast. My bad habits are being highlighted by the fact that someone near me has broken them.
And what's really interesting about that is that you made money from other people drinking. And so you clearly had no problem with anyone drinking. You just chose not to drink for you so that you could grow the business, get more in shape, whatever.
Which makes it feel even more elective, which makes it feel like even more of an insult.
Right, which makes it also more ridiculous how violent they were about opposing this choice, because you were like, I'm not projecting anything on you. I would prefer it if you drank.
Please
spend as much money as you can at the club.
Continue.
Like,
Yeah.
Right. But even that, like, it's a perfect example because there wasn't a shade of judgment behind it, because you are incentivized to have them drink.
I was opening the doors myself.
Yeah. And cracking the bottle.
Yeah. Pretty much.
Like, I actually think it is the perfect example, because it shows that it is not about you. That is the point. Because there was no judgment. You were literally incentivized them for them to continue that behavior, and yet they still felt bad and angry that you were not doing something that they were doing, which then made them feel that they felt like they shouldn't be doing it either, and then they just projected it onto you. And it's like when you have this violent opposition, one of the things that I've actually been more recently thinking about is like, no one hates you. They hate the projection that they have of you that's 99% made up, because no one can know 100% of you. Like, the only person whose hate you should really pay attention to is your own, because there's no other person on earth who has full context to who you are. Yeah. And so the person that someone's making fun of, or they hate, or that they're disagreeing with, is the person, and within the context of here, obviously, that's consumed 6 30-second clips of you over the 37 years you've been alive, and has filled in the blanks for every other minute of your existence, with the exception of those 3 minutes that they have consumed.
Correct.
And so how much weight, I should probably proportionally weight the opinions of people based on the shared experience that they have of my life with me. And so if someone has spent one day with me out of the 37 years that I've been alive, I have 37 times 365 more context on the individual than they do. And so I should probably weight it appropriately to that.
There's an idea from Gwynder Bogle, which is about this. It's called tilting at windmills. An online stranger doesn't know you. All they have are a few vague impressions of you, too meager to form anything but a phantasm. So when they attack you, they're really just attacking their own imagination. There is no need to take it personally, which is related to this principle of humanity. Every single person is exactly what you would be if you were them. This includes your political opponents. So instead of dismissing them as evil or stupid, maybe seek to understand the circumstances that led them to their conclusions.
You know I love that.
So good.
It also teases out something that I might have to put my hat on for. But,
throw it on. Yeah, switch it out.
Which is that if you were going to be the same, if you were the exact same person as they are, if you were them, then it removes the concept of free will.
If you're poor, try the Buy Nothing Challenge. The Buy Nothing Challenge, for 30 days, buy nothing except food, rent, gas, and insurance. Don't bring your wallet with you when you leave home. Pack lunch. See how much you save. Repeat until you have as much as you want. Brackets, pairs well with working 12 hours a day. Being good with money literally just means spend less than you make and put the extra in things that go up, not down.
Financial education in 2 tweets. The hardest part about most things isn't knowing what to do. It's doing it. And the hard part about doing it is that you're often more rewarded for every action except for the one that you need to take. And so there's 100 things you can spend money on. There's only one nothing. And so it's so exhausting to not spend money when you don't have any, because every single thing that you want, or many things that you want, have price tags associated with them. And you have to, at all moments in the day, say no 100 times in order to, quote, spend nothing. And so it's this muscle that we have to build. But I strongly encourage the Buy Nothing Challenge, because one, you realize how little you can really live on. And when you realize how little you can really live on, you realize how much more risk you can actually take. Because the apparent downside of what if I lost everything becomes incredibly tangible, which is like, well, I lived on $200, $500.
Not even that bad.
Yeah, it's actually, and when you realize that, and this is, I think, Morgan Struessel, I don't know if I'm saying his name right. When we look back in time at some of our happiest moments, we think we were happy when we were poor. But I'll just say on an anecdotal level, I'll say one of my own words. We often say that we'll be happy. Like, we already have the things that we said we want that would make us happy.
Yeah.
And yet here we are.
Yeah, there's a nostalgia discount for sure, that nobody ever believes that we're living through a golden era. Golden eras only ever occur in history.
The good old days.
Yeah, it's always the good old days. I asked a question actually recently, which was, there's certain periods that people look back on nationally as times that were particularly wonderful. I did ask the question, do you think anyone will look back at 2026 and think that it was the good old days at some point? Every generation believes that they're living through a moment which is markedly different than the generations before. This one does feel particularly unremarkable in that way. Yeah, to a degree, yeah. I think when I'm trying to project forward stuff that currently we think about with loving nostalgia from the past, and I'm not sure, but then probably during the 90s, right, did people think that WWF and F-16 fighter jets and Limp Bizkit were going to be what people in 3 decades time would look back on with loving tenderness?
So I'm going to say 2 things that I think are, so one, a behaviorist can explain the nostalgia paradox, which is that across species, negative consequences fade.
Fading affect bias. Yeah.
But positive doesn't. And so that's why you have your ex that you always want to go back to, because you forget how crazy she is, and then you see her and then you're like, oh my God, I forgot how crazy you were. And why you drink and then the next morning you say, I'm never going to drink again. And then 7 days later you're drinking again.
Decade of my life.
Right. And so, but like, even being cognizant of the fact that punishment fades and reward sticks is helpful for making decisions in the future. So that's thing one. The second is that, like, when I really think about at least the eras of my life, so I'll just talk personally. When I think about when I was, sleeping on the gym floor, in a lot of ways that was like the good old days. Like, I was fighting really hard for something I really cared about. And then, there was a moment where it started to work, and I started, launching gym to gym to gym with Layla, which was like, wasn't necessarily the good old days, but like, it was she and I, and we were figuring it out. And I think I have a lot of respect and admiration for that kid who was just working his ass off, even though I didn't know what I was doing. I tried. And then obviously when things started working out with Gym Launch and it was really scaling, it's like, I remember that period. And like, I think you can ascribe a good old days, especially on a personal level, to like almost every season of life when you look in retrospect, just because the negative has faded.
Of course.
And so it's one of these things that's like, it's like a great way to feel bad about how you feel today, because you know you should feel better, because you know you will feel better about today in the future, because the
Bingo.
future will have today without the negative consequences and the stressors of today that in the future seem irrelevant. And so it's like, whenever you think about this stuff, like what is my operation for gratitude is imagine something good, imagine losing it, and then realize that you haven't lost it. That is how you feel gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
At the most basic level.
Mm-hmm.
And so whenever you repeat that operation, either in your mind or in reality, like you feel gratitude. And so I think nostalgia is a flavor of that as we go back in time. Now we can't get it back, but I guess we can see it through a new lens.
That's the memory dividend thing from Bill Perkins.
Phenomenal book. Everyone,
Die
really
with
good
Zero.
book.
Go and buy Die with Zero.
Really, really good book.
Really great. 3 hours to read. Fantastic. Yeah, I think some of the areas that people rely on with more nostalgia from a personal standpoint, times with more simplicity and fewer trade-offs, I think, tend to be looked back on with, I was really singularly focused in that way.
Life was simpler then.
Correct. And there is an accumulation of complexity. So I wonder if simplification would be a way to remove some of the restrictions between now and front-running some of that gratitude for now in the moment.
I think that's really interesting, because I think that the complexity of our lives in the moment that we were living them was just as maxed out as it is now, because we're human, not because life was more complex, but because we always find the maximum amount of problems that our brains can perceive. And so at any given moment, whether you're, 20 or 40, like you might have absolutely more problems when you're 40, but you also have higher ability to deal with those problems, and the problems that you perceived when you were 20, the worst thing that's ever happened to you is the worst thing ever happened to you. You will still have the same number of problems. And so the idea of simplifying our lives is really just an attempt to mirror only the incomplete memory that we have of that moment.
Yes. I'm going to try and get rid of the trade-offs that I did have to do in the past, in the moment, to make the moment more like the past. Yeah, there's a Adam Lane Smith taught me this a couple of years ago. I think it's really, really true. Your life does not need to be easier. It needs to be simpler. Your system is designed to handle stress and challenge, but not complication. You probably handle hard things pretty well, but feel overwhelmed when they become messy. Do not attribute to difficulty that which can be explained by complexity. Really cool.
Yeah.
Really cool. And I think that's where a lot of stress is felt. And this is the line from whatever, fucking 4 episodes ago, where there's no such thing as being overworked, only underrested. That overworked is the asterisk. Overworked at a small bucket of things. But there is such a thing as being spread too thin and overworked across a larger bucket of things. If all that you have to do for the next 6 months or 2 years is write a book, it's going to be stressful, but it's going to be enjoyable. If you have to write a book and raise a kid and manage finances and go to work and try and get in shape and connect with your partner and your mum's ill, and it only takes 2 or 3 of those and people fall apart. Your system is designed to handle intensity, but not complexity.
I think most people would be astonished at how much they can accomplish if they remove things. Because I don't think focus is also not additive, but multiplicative, in that the best things that I've ever made, books, things like that, the best works that I've created have been things that had many coats of paint. And so I can look at the same project over a long period of time. When I'm on good days, on bad days, it rains, it's sunshine. Layla and I are good. Layla and I are bad. Like through all these different seasons. And so I look at the work through as many lenses as I can. And then it creates the texture to the work that gives it that depth. And I like the many coats of paint because like you have to let it dry. Like it's very rare that something on the first shot is very good. It just takes a lot of attempts. But you can't get that surface area of thinking if you can only think about it a handful of times. And so there's only so much thinking time that you have, which means that if you give it to 5 projects rather than one, getting 1 inch deep on 5 projects is rarely a novel concept. Like, you rarely will come up with something that is inherently unique because many people can give 1 inch deep thought towards any idea.
Well, also, somebody who is 1/5 as good as you at doing that thing are giving 100% of themselves. So you're basically curtailing your capacity by spreading it across multiple things.
And again, I relate things back to business, but in some ways, you believing that you can pursue multiple masters is actually arrogant because it assumes that the people that you compete against can't beat you when they're fully focused on one thing, and that you can somehow compete with 3 or 4 or 5 people at the same time and still win. And maybe you can, but I think the vast majority of people just lose.
Stop whining. Every position has an advantage. Younger means cutting edge. Older means more experience. Smaller company means more personalized. Bigger company means longer track record. Rich means resources to use. Broke means nothing to lose. You aren't limited by your resources, only your resourcefulness.